At the entrance, there was a sign that said, "Authorized personnel only." I smiled at the guard and said softly, "I'm the CEO's mother." He looked at me, then laughed. "Ma'am, your photo is right here on the list. It says never allow entry." For a moment, I thought he was joking, until I saw my own face, printed, circled in red, like a criminal. My knees almost gave way. And just then, the glass doors opened. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, walked out in her gold heels, talking to her staff as if I didn't exist. I held the food I brought for her and pretended I knew nothing. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and comment where you're watching from: Nigeria, the US, the Philippines, Kenya, South Africa. Because what I'm about to say is the kind of pain only a parent who raised a child alone will ever understand. My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I am a widow. I raised my only daughter, Elena, alone after losing my husband when she was just 7 years old. Those early days. God, those days felt like drowning in slow motion. I spent years washing other people's clothes until my hands cracked and bled. I tutored neighborhood children for pennies just to scrape together Elena's school fees. There were nights, too many nights, when I went to bed hungry so she could have a proper meal. I remember sitting by candlelight during power cuts, mending her school uniform by hand while she slept, my fingers trembling from exhaustion and malnutrition. The rain would pour through our leaking roof, and I'd move her bed to the dry corner while I slept in puddles. But every morning, I'd pack her lunch with whatever little I had, kiss her forehead, and watch her walk to school with her head held high. That's all I wanted, for her to hold her head high. I didn't give her luxury, but I gave her everything that mattered: love, faith, and a clean name. When she was accepted for that scholarship to study abroad, I cried for 3 days straight. Not from sadness, but from relief that all those sleepless nights, all those empty stomachs, all those prayers whispered in the dark had finally been answered. Elena studied computer science in London and came back to build her tech company, Alaris Global. The newspapers called her a rising star, a self-made CEO. And all I ever wanted was to see where my daughter worked, just once, to stand in that building and whisper to myself, "I'm proud of you, my child." That Tuesday morning, I woke up before dawn to prepare her favorite meal, jollof rice with fried plantains and chicken, the way I used to make it when she was little and had a fever. I wrapped it carefully in aluminum foil and placed it in an old basket I decorated with a ribbon. Inside, I tucked a small handmade card that simply said, "To my daughter, the CEO. From your first supporter." The bus ride to her office district took 2 hours. I didn't mind. I spent those 2 hours imagining her surprise, her smile, maybe even a hug. I pictured her introducing me to her colleagues. "This is my mother. She's the reason I'm here." When I finally saw the building, my breath caught in my throat. It was all glass and steel, reaching toward the heavens like a crystal cathedral. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and luxury cars lined the parking garage. For a moment, I felt so small, so out of place in my faded dress and worn shoes. But then I straightened my shoulders. This was where my daughter worked. My daughter, who used to do homework on our kitchen table that wobbled on uneven legs. I approached the security desk with my basket, my heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. The guard was a young man in a crisp uniform, professional and polite. I told him I was Elena's mother, the CEO's mother, and that I'd brought her lunch. His eyebrows rose slightly, and he reached for a thick binder. He flipped through several pages, running his finger down columns of names and photos. Then his expression changed. The politeness strained from his face, replaced by something between confusion and pity. He turned the binder toward me, and there it was, my own photograph, the one from my old church directory that Elena had requested years ago for insurance purposes, she'd said. But now it was printed in black and white, with a thick red circle around it and bold letters underneath. "Do not admit under any circumstances." The sound seemed to echo in my head. Never allow entry. Never allow entry. Never allow entry. Other employees in the lobby had begun to notice. Some slowed their pace, glancing over with curiosity. I felt their eyes on me like needles, each stare pricking holes in what remained of my dignity. The security guard cleared his throat uncomfortably, uncertain how to handle the situation delicately. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry, but I have to follow company policy." Just then, the glass doors slid open with a soft whoosh. And there she was. My Elena. My baby girl. But not the child I remembered. This woman was radiant, powerful, untouchable. Her heels clicked against the marble like a metronome, keeping time to a song I didn't recognize. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than I spent on food in 6 months, and her hair was styled in perfect waves that caught the lobby's chandelier light. She was speaking to 2 men in expensive suits, gesturing with manicured hands as she outlined some business strategy. Her voice was confident, authoritative, the voice of someone who commanded respect and got it. For a split second, my heart swelled with pride. This brilliant, successful woman was my daughter. My baby who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But then our eyes met, and I watched something die in hers. The conversation she was having didn't stop. She didn't miss a beat in her explanation of quarterly projections or market expansion. But her gaze flickered to me, then to the security desk, then back to her colleagues. I saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. I forced myself to smile, the same gentle smile I'd given her every morning before school. I lifted my hand in a small wave, mouthing, "Hello, sweetheart," across the lobby. She looked right through me. Not past me. Through me. As if I were made of glass, as transparent as the building that housed her success. She guided her colleagues toward the elevators, her laughter ringing out as someone made a joke I couldn't hear. The sound of her joy felt like shards of glass in my chest. I stood there, still holding my basket of food, still wearing my hopeful smile, watching the elevator doors close on my daughter's life. The security guard was saying something about company policy and legal liability, but his voice sounded far away, like it was coming from underwater. I nodded politely, thanked him for his time, and turned to leave. I made it exactly 7 steps before my vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not in her building, surrounded by her success and my shame. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to keep smiling as I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear whispers starting among the employees who had witnessed the scene. "Wasn't that? Did you see how she just?" I thought she said she was. Each whispered word felt like another nail in the coffin of the relationship I thought I had with my daughter. I raised her to hold her head high. I never knew she'd learn to look down on me. The bus ride home was the longest 2 hours of my life. I sat in the back, clutching my basket of food that would never be eaten, staring out the window at the city my daughter had conquered while somehow losing her way home to me. When I finally reached my small apartment, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the plate I had prepared with such love that morning. The smell of the jollof rice, once comforting and familiar, now made my stomach turn. Every grain reminded me of the mornings I'd gone without breakfast so she could have a proper meal. Every piece of chicken reminded me of the times I'd told her I wasn't hungry when there was only enough for one. I remembered Elena as a little girl, throwing her arms around my neck after every exam, whispering, "Thank you, Mama," into my ear. Those small arms that once clung to me for comfort and safety, how did they grow strong enough to push me away? That night, I didn't cry. I couldn't. The pain was too deep for tears, too raw for the release that crying might bring. Instead, I sat in my chair by the window, watching the lights of the city twinkle in the distance, and whispered into the darkness, "Lord, I gave birth to my own stranger." I thought about all the sacrifices that had led to this moment. Every missed meal, every sleepless night, every prayer I'd sent up asking for her success and happiness. I'd prayed so hard for her to rise above our circumstances, to build a life bigger than the small world I could provide. But I never imagined that rising above would mean leaving me so far behind that I'd become a liability to be managed, a security risk to be contained. The next morning brought no relief, only the hollow ache of questions I was afraid to answer. Had I failed her somehow? Had I raised her wrong? Was there something about me, about where we came from, that was so shameful it needed to be erased? I was still sitting at my table, still staring at the untouched food, when I heard a soft knock at my door. My heart leaped for just a moment. Maybe Elena had come to explain, to apologize, to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But when I opened the door, it was my old friend Grace, who worked in the cleaning services at Elena's building. Grace's face was heavy with the weight of something she didn't want to tell me. She came inside without invitation, sat across from me at my wobbly kitchen table, and took my hands in hers. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt." I nodded, bracing myself for whatever blow was coming. Nothing could hurt worse than yesterday, I thought. I was wrong. Your daughter told everyone at the company that she has no parents. She's been telling people for years that she's an orphan who built herself from nothing. There's even a whole story about how she grew up in foster care and overcame impossible odds. It's part of her brand, her success narrative. The self-made CEO who had no one but refused to give up. The words hit me like a freight train. An orphan, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Grace nodded, tears in her own eyes. I heard her giving an interview to some business magazine last month. She talked about having no family, no support system, no one to fall back on. She made it sound like her greatest strength was learning to depend only on herself because she had no choice. The realization crashed over me in waves. The rejection at the building yesterday wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It wasn't even just shame about our modest background. Elena had deliberately erased me from her story. She hadn't just denied me, she had replaced me with a narrative that sold better than the truth of a mother's love. She didn't just deny me. She replaced me with a story that sold better than love. I sat in stunned silence as Grace continued talking, but I couldn't focus on her words. My mind was reeling with the implications. Every article I'd read about her success, every award she'd won for overcoming adversity, it was all built on the lie that I didn't exist. That all my sacrifices, all my love, all the years I'd poured my life into raising her had simply never happened. How do you mourn someone who's still alive? How do you grieve for a relationship with someone who has not only rejected you, but has actively worked to erase any evidence that you ever mattered to them? After Grace left, I sat alone with this new knowledge, feeling like I was drowning in the irony of it all. I had raised her to be strong, independent, capable of standing on her own. I had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. She was everything I'd hoped she would become. But in becoming that person, she had decided that I was dead weight, an anchor that would only drag down her inspiring story of self-made success. The woman who owed her strength to the mother who had sacrificed everything had decided that mother was a liability worth erasing. For 3 days, I barely ate. I barely slept. I just sat with this knowledge, turning it over and over in my mind like a stone I couldn't put down. I thought about confronting her, about showing up at her office and demanding answers. I thought about calling the newspapers and telling them the truth about their self-made CEO. I thought about 100 different ways to make her face what she had done. But in the end, I chose something different. I chose to wait and watch. Because revenge wasn't what I wanted. I wanted her to remember. I wanted her to remember the little girl who used to promise that when she grew up, she'd buy a big house for both of us. I wanted her to remember the teenager who used to call me her hero. I wanted her to remember who had loved her first, longest, and most completely. I learned through Grace that there was going to be a big company event at the end of the month. Elena was receiving some prestigious award for Self-Made CEO of the Year. There would be cameras, journalists, all the important people in her industry. It was going to be her moment of ultimate triumph, the culmination of everything she'd built. I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to remember. I spent the next few weeks preparing something small but meaningful. I went through my old photo albums and found a picture from Elena's high school graduation. In it, she's wearing her cap and gown, beaming with pride, her arms wrapped around me in a tight hug. On the back of the photo, in her own teenage handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, Mama. I couldn't have done this without you. I love you forever." I had that photo professionally framed and wrote a new message on a small card. For the girl who once promised, "Mom, I'll make you proud. You did, my child, but not like this." The night of the award ceremony, I put on my best dress, the same one I'd worn to her college graduation, and took the bus across town to the hotel where the event was being held. I didn't buy a ticket. I didn't try to sneak in. I simply walked into the lobby and found a quiet corner where I could wait and watch. Through the glass doors of the ballroom, I could see the glittering crowd, the stage with its backdrop of corporate logos, the tables full of executives celebrating their achievements. And there, at the head table, was my daughter. She looked radiant, confident, completely at ease in her world of success and recognition. When her name was called for the award, I watched her walk to the stage with the grace and poise I'd always known she possessed. She accepted the crystal trophy with a brilliant smile and moved to the microphone to give her acceptance speech. "This award means everything to me," she began, her voice clear and strong. "Because I built this company with no help, no connections, no safety net. Everything I am, everything I've achieved, I earned through my own determination and refusal to give up." When you have no one to rely on but yourself, you discover strength you never knew you had. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Cameras flashed. She was giving them exactly the inspiring story they wanted to hear, the orphan who became a CEO through sheer force of will. But then something unexpected happened. The large screen behind the stage, which had been displaying corporate logos and statistics about her company's success, suddenly flickered. A technical glitch, perhaps, or maybe something more intentional. The screen went black for a moment, then a video began to play. It was old footage, grainy, and obviously recorded on an amateur camera years ago. It showed a young Elena, maybe 16 years old, standing in our tiny kitchen on her birthday. She was holding a homemade cake I'd managed to scrape together the ingredients for, and she was looking directly into the camera with shining eyes. One day, her younger self was saying, "When I'm successful and have my own company, I'm going to buy the biggest, most beautiful office building, and I'm going to give the top floor to my mom. Because she's the strongest person I know, and she deserves to have the best view in the whole city." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Elena on the stage froze, her speech forgotten, staring up at the screen in shock. The video continued for a few more seconds, showing her blowing out her birthday candles while I sang to her in the background, my voice full of love and hope for her future. People in the audience began murmuring, looking from the screen to Elena and back again. "That's her mother," someone whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "She said she was an orphan, but that's clearly her mother." Elena's face had gone pale. She gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The confident CEO had disappeared, replaced by a young woman who looked lost and ashamed. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I had said what I came to say without speaking a single word. I placed the framed photo on the registration table near the entrance, where she would be sure to see it, and quietly left the hotel. I walked to the bus stop, my mission complete, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, peace. Later that night, around midnight, I heard a car pull up outside my apartment. Then footsteps on the stairs. Then a soft, hesitant knock on my door that I recognized immediately, even though it had been so long since I'd heard it. I opened the door to find Elena standing in my hallway, still wearing her evening gown from the ceremony, but her perfect makeup was streaked with tears. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked young again. Like the little girl who used to come to me when she was scared or hurt. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why did you come there tonight?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. Beneath all the success and sophistication, beneath the awards and accolades, I could still see the child I had raised. The child who had once needed me, had loved me, had promised never to forget where she came from. "Because you forgot who made you strong enough to stand there," I said quietly. We stood in silence for a long moment, mother and daughter, separated by years of distance and hurt, but connected by bonds that even denial couldn't completely sever. Finally, she stepped into my apartment and sank onto my old couch, the same couch where she used to do her homework while I cooked dinner. She put her face in her hands and began to sob, not the controlled tears of an adult, but the raw, broken crying of a child who knows she's done something terribly wrong. "I was ashamed, Mom," she said between sobs. "I was ashamed of being poor, of where I came from, of having to explain why my mother lived in a tiny apartment while I lived in a penthouse. It was easier to just pretend you didn't exist. It was easier to be an orphan than to be the daughter who left her mother behind." My heart broke all over again, not from anger this time, but from understanding. I sat beside her on the couch and gently stroked her hair the way I used to when she was small and troubled. "And I was proud of being your mother, even when I had nothing," I said softly. "I was proud when you wore second-hand clothes to school because you wore them with dignity. I was proud when you won scholarships because you worked harder than anyone else. I was proud when you built your company because you had the courage to dream big. But I was never ashamed of you, and I never needed you to be ashamed of me." She looked up at me then, her face raw with grief and regret. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom. I don't know how to take back all the lies I've told." "You don't have to take them back all at once," I said. "You just have to stop telling them. You start by remembering that your strength didn't come from having nothing, it came from having a mother who was willing to give you everything, even when everything wasn't very much." We talked until dawn, my daughter and I. We talked about the years that had passed, the hurt that had grown between us, the love that had survived despite everything. We talked about shame and pride, about success and sacrifice, about the difference between rising above your circumstances and pretending they never existed. And slowly, gradually, I watched my daughter come home to me. 3 weeks later, Elena published a statement on her company's website and social media channels. It was honest, vulnerable, and completely different from the polished corporate speak she usually favored. "I need to correct something I've said many times before, and I need to acknowledge someone I should have been celebrating all along. I am not an orphan. I am the daughter of Margaret Williams, a woman who worked multiple jobs to send me to school, who went without so I could have, and who loved me with a strength that built the foundation for everything I've accomplished. I told people I had no family because I thought it made my story more impressive. I was wrong. The most impressive thing about my story isn't that I did it alone. It's that I had a mother who believed in me even when I stopped believing in myself, and who kept loving me even when I stopped deserving it. The strongest person I know isn't me. It's my mother, the woman I once denied. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how grateful I am." She also announced that she was renaming her company's charitable foundation the Margaret Initiative, and that its mission would be to support single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. A few days after that, I got a call asking me to come to Elena's office building. When I arrived, the same security guard who had turned me away weeks earlier was at the desk. But this time, he stood up when he saw me, came around the desk, and opened the door wide. "Welcome, Mrs. Williams," he said with genuine respect. "MS. Elena is waiting for you upstairs." I walked through those glass doors, across that marble floor, and into the elevator that carried me up to my daughter's office. When the doors opened, Elena was waiting there, along with her entire executive team. They applauded as I stepped out, Not mockingly, not out of obligation, but with real warmth and respect. "Everyone," Elena said, her voice strong and clear, "I'd like you to meet my mother. She's the CEO of my life." I didn't want revenge. I only wanted her to remember where her wings came from. Because parents don't ask for much, just a little respect from the children who grew from their sacrifices. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not making them pay, but watching them finally see. Today, Elena and I have lunch together every Wednesday. Sometimes in her fancy executive dining room, sometimes in my small apartment kitchen. It doesn't matter where we eat. What matters is that we're eating together, that we're talking, that we're rebuilding what was broken between us. She still wears her expensive suits and drives her luxury car and commands rooms full of powerful people. But now, when reporters ask about her success, she tells them about her mother who worked as a seamstress and a tutor, who sacrificed everything for her daughter's education, who taught her that strength comes not from having nothing to lose, but from having someone worth fighting for. And I still live in my small apartment, still take the bus, still cook simple meals with the same love I've always put into everything I do. But now, when I ride past that glass building downtown, I don't see it as a place that rejected me. I see it as a place where my daughter learned to remember who she really is. The child I raised to hold her head high has finally learned that she doesn't have to look down on others to do it. And that, more than any award or recognition or business success, is the achievement I'm most proud of. Because in the end, love doesn't demand to be remembered. Love simply waits, patient and constant, until remembering becomes a choice that leads back home.